Welcome, everybody, to the Northern Miner Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Keevil, coming to you October 31st. Happy Halloween. That was my attempt at an evil laugh, like Dracula or something. And I know it's terrible. It's like I was listening to the recording after, and I sound like that Count from Sesame Street. You know, the guy's like, one cookie, that guy. And so no more voices, but it's Halloween, so I get to have a little bit of fun. But as usual, we are brought to you by the Yukon Mining Alliance. Please surf by yukonminingalliance.ca and check out all the exciting exploration and development going on in the Yukon territory. And as mentioned last week, we have an exciting episode coming up. You may have caught our miner moment last week, where we previewed Lesley's 25-minute chat with filmmaker Nettie Wild, who premiered her documentary in Vancouver, Konalina Arlan the Beautiful, last Friday, October 28th at the Van City Theatre. And that will be there for 2 weeks. So please surf by the Van City site, the box office on Seymour Street, or head over to the Konalina site to secure tickets because it's a must-see. It's a really cool documentary on sort of the intersection between naturalism and the mining and infrastructure industries in northwestern BC in the Golden Triangle. So around Pretium's Bruejack project, Imperial Metals Red Chris mine, and the Northwest Transmission Line. So she got some really cool footage, and her and Lesley really dig into the experience and the personalities involved in making the film. So there's some really good storytelling going on in there. So we'll run that for the bulk of the podcast. But one of the things I wanted to pop in and sort of announce as well is that I have a pretty cool thing coming up here. The Canadian Institute of Mining, Metallurgy, and Petroleum, CIM as we know them in the business, are hosting their annual student night in Vancouver on November 17th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So this is a CIM's Vancouver branch, and it's their premier annual event. And the theme of this year's event is the rise of B2 Gold Corp. And actually, Mike Cinnamond, the CFO of B2 Gold, will be there to give an address, and it's super exciting. I mean, everyone will remember I recently had Clive Johnson, president and CEO of B2 Gold, on the podcast. And anytime I get to talk to anybody from B2, it's really cool because they have such an interesting history as far as working in some challenging jurisdictions, and doing so successfully, and really proving that first principles of Canadian mining can be taken abroad, applied, and done so really successful. So it'll be really interesting to hear from Mike and just sort of some of the stories of the rise of B2 and what they went through to be such a successful company following the acquisition of Bema Gold by Kinross in 2007. So that's sort of the theme of the night, but I will also be there. I'll be emceeing the event. So do come say hi to me as well. I'll be there, and they're giving me a microphone. I don't ask. I'll be there, and I'll have a microphone. So you'll get. It'll be a blast. It'll be a really fun evening. So please head to the CIM website and check out tickets for that because it'll be a blast. So again, that's November 17th, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. I will be there. But without further ado, let's crack right into Lesley's interview with Nettie, and that'll take up the remainder of the podcast. So I will be signing off, and I'll leave you with Lesley and Nettie for some cool insight on the mining industry and sort of the environmental movement in northwestern BC. And I will check back with you next week with our regularly scheduled content. Thanks, everybody.
This week we have filmmaker Nettie Wild, who joins us in the studio today to discuss the upcoming Vancouver theatrical debut of her latest documentary, Konalina Arlan Beautiful, which offers a really compelling and poetic look at industrial development in the remote region and beautiful region of Northwest BC. So thanks so much. This is a pleasure to actually meet you, Nettie. Welcome.
Great. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yeah. As many of our listeners know, of course, like the Northwest BC is a really coveted space for explorers and miners alike. It has an enormous amount of untapped mineral wealth, and it's also home to Aboriginal nations that have conflicting views to development in the region. So even though the issues are really complex, I found that Conalina really broke away from that traditional template of a documentary that zeroes in on mining. So I just wanted to ask Nettie, like, what were your thoughts on creating this film, and what kind of message did you want to bring out?
I didn't want to pound home a message. I don't know about you, but I am really weary of films full of talking heads telling me what to think. And I think everybody else is too, which doesn't mean that I'm not concerned about the environment. I am. But I really thought that this was a part of the province that I have had the privilege of getting to know quite well as an outsider, as a southerner. I'm not from up there. And I'm passionate about that land up there. And the best thing that I could bring there was a curious camera, not a judgmental one. And that, I thought, if I'm not going to bring a polemic up there, what am I going to bring? And I thought, it's art. And what do I mean by that? I mean, getting together the best bunch of documentary artists I could find in the country. And our objective was to pursue the poetry in every single person in front of our lens, from diamond drillers and linemen through to people who protest against them. And the assumption there is that there is poetry and there is a relationship to the land that each one of these people have. So if we could, as a film crew, park any assumptions we have and be open to being surprised, maybe we would be. And we were, big time. And I'm hoping that our audience is, and that's the objective, is just to see if we can give people pause, if we can give people such a visceral experience of this extraordinary place and the equally extraordinary people who move across it, then maybe that kind of dull thud that you hear in the background is the sound of stereotypes hitting the ground. And people will perhaps think about things a little bit differently.
Well, I know I watched the movie last night, and like a little pre-screening to the initial showing, I guess, at Van City Theatre this Friday.
That's right. We're opening
October 28th.
on Friday, and we're running for 2 weeks at the Van City, and then 2 more days at the Rio after that.
So lots of opportunity for anybody listening in Vancouver to catch this film. I was watching it last night, and I didn't really know what I was going into. I knew it was going to be a beautiful film about the Northwest BC. I knew there was going to be mining. I knew there was going to be some touching on some complex issues. And the entire time, I was just so blown away by how you used images to convey this message that was so much more powerful than any words could have ever described.
Right on.
Yeah, and it really made me think differently about my business and made me think differently about life in general. I was just so blown back, and I really feel like this is a must-see for anybody in our industry, whether you're a geologist or like the most staunch, like pro-development, anti-everything else. Like it's so beautiful how it just united everybody and everything up there. The wilderness just draws you in, and we're all kind of the same. At least that's what I felt. What are some other general sentiments that have you heard?
What we found is that, for instance, thanks to Harvey Tremblay, who from High Tech Drilling, who was the first guy to say yes instead of no to our camera. And so we were able to follow Harvey's drill crew up into the Bruejack mine. Again, thanks to Pretium for letting us
Thanks,
do
Pretium.
that.
Thanks, High Tech Drilling.
And, the first person we meet on the way up is a guy called Mike Shannon, who's driving the snowcat across this extraordinary, moving, live glacier. It's like a bucking bronco, right?
So
and the
cool.
first thing that Mike Shannon says to me is, "My head is in the clouds." And then he goes on to explain, and I go on to see what he's talking about. And there he is in this snowcat that's as big as my house. And he's in this cubicle, and he's driving through an area which that day there was those, those puffy clouds that move across the sky really quickly, and the sun is sending the shadows of the crowds scudding across the snow. It was completely surreal. And Mike's in the middle driving this house. And I realized we've got a philosopher king here driving the snowcat. Big surprise. Somebody who's totally plugged into the environment. Somebody who has to be very aware of this changing glacier because his life depends on it. And so does others, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, are we going to write Mike off? No, this is somebody who has a real relationship to the land. Let's get to know him. Let's let our camera see what he does. People in the audience have never seen anything like that before. So there's an opening up there. You for people who perhaps are writing off the mining industry entirely. You going to write off Mike Shannon? I don't think so. And so that was the kind of surprises. Same thing when we were filming the flying in of the towers of the Northwest Transmission Line. That was a real, oh my God moment. It was, here we have the world's biggest helicopter flying in towers that are 60,000 pounds apiece.
Wow.
Hang on, I better say that again. They're flying in, the world's biggest helicopters flying in towers that are 16,000.
Still impressive.
Pounds apiece. And as they're going over the mountains, the towers are catching sunlight, and they're like these big gleaming crosses flying across the mountains.
Wow.
And then they're being brought into place, and they turn into these huge, big, swinging pendulums that these guys who, if you were to stand next to them, are big and now are rendered really puny in the backwash of this extraordinary helicopter. And we shoot it with an 800 millimeter lens in slow motion, and you're going, I don't think I've ever shot anything so beautiful, so contradictory, so needing no words whatsoever, because you've got everything. You've got the elegance of engineering, you've got the beauty of the landscape, you've got the dexterity of the lineman, and you've got this really raw clear cut. Nobody needs to make a comment. The image says it. And when we showed the footage to the guys afterwards, before turning on the computer, one of them was very skeptical, as are many people in the industry. And he voiced what many people think. He said, "You're not going to set us up, are you?" And I said, "Just take a look at the footage and see what you think." And so we had a little tailgate screening on the back of our truck.
Fun.
And they looked at it, and this guy, moments later, said, "Oh my God, I've never seen my work portrayed this way before." And I thought, bingo. That's where we want the language of the film to be. It's complex. It's not a puff piece about anything. And it's beautiful, and it causes people to think. And I think that's what art can do in these really controversial times when everybody's kind of yelling at each other at the top of their lungs. There's a lot of dogma, a lot of rhetoric, not a lot of listening. And I think that is dangerous.
Wow, yeah, everyone's always trying to find a good guy, a bad guy to any story. Like, look at Hollywood. There's always that sort of polarity to any sort of good storytelling, and at the end we all want the good guy to win. But yeah, and that is something that you were really able to convey in this film, is there is no good guy, there is no bad guy, just watch and see.
And there's this filmmaker who in every aspect of my work is using metal that comes out of the ground.
Yeah.
So I'm a walking contradiction. I want those valleys to stay pristine. I totally get it. When the First Nations elders, they have traditional hunting territories, they're invested in a landscape in many other ways other than mining. Completely understand that.
Yeah.
Within that, what are we going to do? Because we have a big communal project here, and the mining industry has to be a part of the discussion, which is why I so applaud Harvey Tremblay in letting us film his crew.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question, because I'm curious about, you said that this idea kind of almost took hold, I guess, as you started filming and you started noticing that the purpose of the film just kind of present it to you.
It started to tell me what it
started
wanted
telling
to
you,
say.
right, which again is so cool.
Yeah.
And in High Tech Drilling, big shout out for them because they obviously were really big helpers in making this
huge.
Become. Did you have difficulties talking to the mining industry, talking with First Nations groups, with the different local communities?
At one point, I had no access to anybody.
Really?
Yeah. At one point, when the Tall Tan were blockading Imperial Metals wouldn't give me any access. And the woman running the blockade said that unless I allowed my truck to be a part of the blockade, I would lose access to her part of the story. And I tried to explain to her, perhaps my camera is more valuable to you in the long run than my truck over 2 nights on the blockade.
Right.
And she didn't go for it, so I lost access. So there I am, not able to get into either quote side. And in a funny kind of way, in retrospect, it was a blessing. Because that's the classic standoff. How many times on the news have we seen First Nations blockading a mining operation or a forestry operation? It's become in BC routine, familiar. I don't mean to say that the issues aren't high stakes and aren't important. But what it did was when that happened, although we have a few scenes of the blockade in Konalina, but it forced me to go, okay, you said you were coming up here to do a different movie. You said that you're out to find the poetry. Go for it. You know, it's not, you're not making news. It forced me to kind of peel back the layers. And so I found Harvey. And Harvey, headed up High Tech Drilling and had a drill crew and was willing to allow us to follow his film crew. I found Kelly, who's the First Nations diamond driller, who's really proud of his job and whose grandfather is protesting against the mining. So this is it was really interesting how it forced us to focus more on the Northwest Transmission Line. Couldn't get into the mining right smack dab in the middle of where we were filming. But so was the Northwest Transmission Line. Paid off big time. And in that particular case, Rockstead Power said, yes, film us. We're proud of what we do. And poof, they should be. It's amazing.
So what kind of changes have you noticed? I know that this film has come out in Vancouver Film Festival. It was showed in Toronto Hot Docs Festival too, where it got the Best Canadian Feature Documentary. You won an award for Women in Film and Television Artistic Merit at the VFF. And since this movie has come out, what kind of feedback have you gotten from those initial people that may have been against the film in the first place? Has there been any change? What's the general sentiment?
Well, they're all coming to see the movie.
That's great.
It was interesting. I think the people who appear in the film have come to see it. And have given it a thumbs up, which is great. We've made sure that everybody knows that the film is playing. This is really interesting for me. I think that the kind of boots on the ground people in the industry, the geologists, the prospectors, the line cutters, the men and women who are actually out in the bush, they love it. And I know that because they're coming up to me afterwards in the cinema. I know, for instance, that Mike Shannon is having a screening of Konalina, Our Land Beautiful, up in the Bruejack camp itself. Cool. We're getting requests from other mining crews to get it up into the camps. So that's very interesting for me. I know that the Northern Miner, for instance, got a letter to the editor from a geo when we showed in Toronto, who basically said, go see this movie.
Go see it.
Right? So I know that. I also know that people who are in more nervous-making positions, people who are actually running mines, people who are dealing with that extraordinary dance with investors and all that added complexity, I also know they're coming to see the film, and they're not doing it in an extremely public way. I don't care. I just want them to come and see the film, buy their bag of popcorn, and have an experience.
It's such an experience.
It's really, really important that people know that they can come to the movie, They're not going to be pilloried. They're not going to be targeted either on the screen or in the discussions afterwards. But more, I want to see if, they either feel moved to joining the conversation, either in the theater, in the car, afterwards, in their own head, because it's really important. This is what Harvey says. It's really important for the mining industry to step up to the mic, step into the community conversation.
Right.
As he says, we haven't got anything to hide. So let's have that conversation. And in any way that I can, I'm hoping that Colina will encourage that.
Right. And I guess, too, it would go for the other side as well, because when people are arguing, it's difficult to have a conversation about anything. You mentioned before on the environmental side, the left wing side per se, what kind of feedback have you been hearing from them?
Well, it's been really interesting on the other side of the spectrum. I think by and large, most of my audience members, no matter which side of the many sides of the fence they are on, the most common comment has been, thanks for not telling me what to think.
Cool.
And the other one is, my God, it's so beautiful. However, the film does have its detractors. And interestingly enough, it's coming from the kind of radical left who feel like I should have, given the gears to the mining community and to the mining industry. So that's a very interesting place for me to be in. And what I say to them is, bring it up in discussion afterwards, not so much your critique of the mining industry, but your critique of me as a filmmaker, because I think what we're entering into is I'm challenging you and everybody else into a different kind of discussion. If you come into if we, as a community, come into this debate with parking our assumptions and really, in this particular case, spending 96 minutes with people who you normally wouldn't sit down at the table with, then you might see something that surprises you, and that will allow you into another conversation. And on top of all of that, I just really believe that all of us are in the middle of a really shared project. We're in the middle of a big paradigm shift as a larger community as to how we're going to create a sustainable world. You can't leave the mining industry out of the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do it. So, and what are you going to do with the contradiction that we're all feeding the mining industry with everything that we use in our daily lives?
Yeah.
What are we going to do about that? I think it's going to mean ramping down dependency. I think it's going to mean more targeted mining. I think it's going to mean more rigorous environmental controls of where you do mine, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that has to be done as a community. That's not just the mining industry on one side or just environmentalists screaming on the other. This is a really complex, and I think if you've got the right mindset, a really exciting conversation where there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Instead of doom and gloom and dogma coming from both sides. And that's why I think Harvey Tremblay is a real hero in this.
Cool.
Because he's really calling out to people to enter the discussion.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what your film did for me, was to demonstrate just how powerful what powerful of a conversation you can have without words to create a space.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's kind of what it did for me, and especially how I look at the industry now is like to create a space of indifference, of non-stereotyping, no judgment, and to create a place where people can come and actually have a discussion and look at it in a brighter view.
Or just experience it, as you say. It's really interesting what art can do.
Cool.
And it's really funny. When you say to a mining executive or a militant protester on a blockade, oh, don't worry, I'm just making art, it doesn't go over very well. But think about this.
Right.
If I'm able to create a visceral experience, it's like it enters into your consciousness through your skin or something, rather than somebody yakking at you.
Yeah.
And that's what art can do. You can come away puzzled, like mulling stuff over. Here's my favorite review. A woman came up to me, dyed-in-the-wool environmentalist. She said, I can't stand that transmission line and everything it represents. It's the edge of an evil wedge that's going to destroy a pristine wilderness. And I'm really uncomfortable with the fact that I love that scene in your movie. It is so beautiful watching those transmission lines go in. I had no idea. That's, for me, like watching it with the footage with the lineman who went, oh, I've never seen my work portrayed this way before. That's where the movie rests. That's where it needs to be. And as a filmmaker, I don't need to tell people what they should or shouldn't think about development. Nobody gives a hoot what Nettie Wild thinks about that. But I can bring something else, I think. And that's what Konalina strives to do.
Do you feel that your past experience, your father was a doctor who's an avid guy who's interested in the stock market?
My granddad.
Your granddad.
Yeah, my granddad.
Do you feel like that interesting history that you had kind of almost set you up to create the stage?
I inherited a real love of the bush and a mine from my grandfather and my mother. Both of them would take off for 2 to 3 months at a time, often together, with guide outfitters out in the bush. And the only thing that my grandfather loved more than fishing was the chase of something that glittered in the rocks, right? And he was a doctor, so he's not a knowledgeable geologist or prospector, but he ended up with controlling shares of a mine that was a passion for him. And yes, I think both those things completely made me open to when I was up in the Northwest and you'd see these geos coming off the mountain or line cutters, really crappy weather, and you say, how was your day? And they'd look at you and they were completely beaten up by the elements.
Oh, yes.
They looked like, they'd been dragged through a mountain, which they had. And they loved it.
Loved it.
Right? And they went, it was incredible. It was incredible out there. They'd been dropped off by some chopper into paradise.
Yeah.
That was gnarly. And that's why they were there. So when you look into that young person's eyes and you see that look, you cannot say, oh, don't they know that they're actually destroying the environment? Right? That's the line of the left. Don't those people know that they're actually the beginning of the end? And you look in that young, educated geologist's eyes, and you have to go, yeah, these people do know what they're doing, and they also have a real love of the land. So let them into the conversation. Don't close them out.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary world we live in where we can be passionate about so many different things. I want to thank you so much, Nettie, for coming in today.
Come see the movie.
I know. I'm going to come see the movie on Friday, and everyone else
screen.
who's listening, come see it in the big screen. I can only imagine how breathtaking it'll be.
It's shot in 4K in widescreen with 5.1 surround sound. It is a real, 2 bag of popcorn movie. And so come. And it's PG too, so you can bring your kids.
Great. Excellent. Well, this is coming up this Friday, October 28th through to November 10th at the Van City Theatre in Vancouver. Some additional showings in the Rio Theatre as well. So I guess go on your website, Canada Wild Productions.
You can go, first of all, go to the Van City website or go to the Rio for the Vancouver dates. But we're opening in theaters right across the country.
Great.
So if you go to konalina.com, or CanadaWildProductions.com and look for Konalina, you'll see all the dates. So we're opening in Sudbury really soon. We're opening in Smithers. These are big mining communities. And the other thing I just wanted to add is we have co-presenters in each one of those communities that represent the scope of our audience. So for instance, in Vancouver, we're being co-presented by the Northern Miner.
Yes.
Dum-da-dum. And the David Suzuki Foundation.
That's right.
So this is really important.
Cool, right?
And in Smithers, it's the Smithers Exploration Group and Friends of Wild Salmon. So this is the point, folks. This is what we want, is for people to go, yeah, this movie actually could be for me, as opposed to being spooked and thinking that you're just going to get raked over the coals. So come.
Yes, and please send your feedback to Nettie or Northern Miner. We want to hear what you guys think.
Send it to the Miner.
Send it to the Miner. We'll put it out. Yeah, very interested. All right, thanks again for coming, and thanks for everyone for listening in.
Thanks.